The room went silent the moment the chalk stopped moving. A janitor stood at the blackboard, dust on his sleeves, while a room full of brilliant students stared in disbelief. A professor's confident smile slowly faded. Someone whispered, "That can't be right." And yet, the equation was complete, clean, undeniable. Before we dive into how a moment like that could ever happen, take a second to breathe with this story. If you enjoy heartfelt stories about unexpected kindness and human connection, consider subscribing to Kindness Tales. Like the video if it moves you, and share your thoughts in the comments as we go. Your presence here truly matters. The college sat on the edge of a mid-sized American city, the kind of campus with old brick buildings, wide lawns, and classrooms that smelled faintly of chalk and coffee. It was known for its prestige, especially the mathematics department, where students competed fiercely and professors carried reputations that reached far beyond the state. Inside one of those lecture halls worked a janitor most people barely noticed. He arrived before sunrise, pushing his cart through quiet hallways, emptying trash cans, wiping boards, and making sure the rooms were ready for minds far sharper than his. Or so everyone assumed. He was in his late 40s, with graying hair and hands rough from years of physical work. His name rarely mattered to anyone. Students saw him as part of the background, like the humming lights or the squeaky doors. Professors nodded politely, if at all. He didn't mind. He had learned long ago that dignity didn't come from how loudly people acknowledged you, but from how honestly you lived your life. What few people knew was that long before he ever held a mop, he had held textbooks filled with numbers that once made his heart race. In another life, decades earlier, he had been a brilliant math student himself. Life, however, had intervened the way it often does. A sick parent, mounting medical bills, a need to work immediately rather than chase degrees. Dreams had been folded away carefully, like old letters kept in a drawer, never thrown out but rarely opened. Even now as a janitor, he still loved math. He listened from the hallway when doors were open. He glanced at equations left on boards, sometimes pausing longer than he should, solving them quietly in his head before erasing them. It wasn't about proving anything. It was about remembering who he was. One afternoon, a lecture ran late. Students packed their bags noisily while the professor, known for his sharp intellect and sharper tongue, decided to end the class with a challenge. He turned to the board and wrote a complex equation, the kind that made even top students uneasy. He laughed lightly and said something about how none of them would solve it by next week. The janitor was in the room, waiting patiently to clean once everyone left. He stood near the back, holding his cart, eyes fixed on the board. The professor noticed him and smirked, in a moment meant as a joke. He gestured toward the janitor and said, half laughing, that if anyone in the room could solve it on the spot, he'd do something outrageous, even ridiculous, like marrying them. The students laughed. Some rolled their eyes. The janitor felt heat rise in his face, not from the joke itself, but from the familiar sting of being underestimated. He lowered his gaze and waited, telling himself it didn't matter. It was just words. But as the room emptied, the equation remained on the board, staring at him like an old friend asking to be remembered. He stood there longer than usual, heart pounding. He knew the method. He could see the solution forming, step by step, as clearly as if he were back in a classroom decades ago. With a hesitation that felt heavier than the mop in his hand, he picked up the chalk. Outside, students lingered in the hallway, chatting. Through the open door, someone noticed movement at the board. A laugh broke out, followed by curiosity. A few students stepped back inside, watching quietly as the janitor wrote line after line with steady confidence. The sound of chalk echoed in the suddenly quiet room. When the professor returned to grab his notes, he froze. His eyes tracked the equation as it unfolded, his expression shifting from amusement to confusion, then to something like shock. He walked closer, scanning every step, searching for an error that never appeared. The room filled again, this time with silence so thick it felt unreal. The janitor finished, set the chalk down carefully, and stepped back as if bracing for ridicule. Instead, the professor stood there, speechless. He cleared his throat and asked how long he had been working there. The janitor answered simply, years. What followed wasn't applause or laughter. It was respect, slowly and awkwardly forming. The professor admitted in front of everyone that the solution was correct. More than correct, it was elegant. Students looked at the janitor differently now, seeing not just a uniform but a mind. The joke about marriage dissolved into embarrassment, but something else took its place: curiosity, conversation. The professor asked about his background, and the janitor shared quietly the story he rarely told. About school, about leaving, about life. In the days that followed, the janitor's routine changed in small but meaningful ways. Professors greeted him by name. Students asked him questions, not just about math, but about perseverance. One student, struggling and close to giving up, found encouragement in his story. Another asked him to tutor her, and he agreed, surprised at himself for saying yes. The professor, humbled, did something unexpected. He helped the janitor enroll in continuing education courses at the college. Not out of pity, but out of recognition. It wasn't easy. Balancing work, classes, and exhaustion tested him in ways he hadn't felt in years. There were nights he questioned whether it was foolish to try again at his age. But kindness has a way of multiplying. A colleague offered flexible hours. A student left notes of encouragement. The janitor found himself surrounded by a community that now saw him fully. Months turned into years. He earned certifications, then a degree. He stopped carrying a mop and started carrying books again, walking those same hallways with a different posture. Not because he had become someone new, but because the world had finally caught up to who he always was. The professor never forgot that moment at the board. He often told new classes the story, not as a joke, but as a lesson about humility and assumptions. The janitor, now an instructor himself, would smile when he heard it, knowing that a single act of quiet courage had changed more than one life. In the end, it was never about solving an equation or making a clever point. It was about seeing someone, about choosing not to look past a person simply because of their title or uniform. That moment of unexpected respect rippled outward, touching everyone who witnessed it. Kindness doesn't always arrive wrapped in grand gestures. Sometimes it shows up as silence, as listening, as allowing someone to step forward when they're usually told to stay back. And when it does, it has the power to rewrite stories we thought were already finished. If this story reminds us of anything, it's that you never truly know the depth of the person standing beside you. A little respect, a little curiosity, a little kindness can unlock possibilities that change lives. As you go about your day, notice the people you usually overlook. Listen a little longer, smile a little warmer. And if you've ever experienced a moment where kindness shifted your path, share it in the comments. Your story might be the one someone else needs to hear today.